Hello, my name is Virginia Souza, and I'm the founder of the Natural History Museum, Santa Maria. The museum was founded as a nonprofit with my mother and myself, and we did it in honor of my father, who was killed in a plane crash in 1989. And he grew up, he was a native Santa Marian, as am I and my mother. And my father grew up in a time, he lived at 500 West Cypress, and he would walk with his dog down to the riverbed and collect horny toads, and he had a pet hawk, and just lived the Huck Finn lifestyle of those days when the population was probably less than 10,000 people, and open fields were all around us. Then by the time my parents had me, I grew up at 821 South Miller, and across the street was a vacant field. And I collected butterflies and rode my bike everywhere, just the way kids did in the 50s. And fast forward to 1986, when we're much more urbanized and children are taken by their parents in cars to their schools and don't have the opportunities to ride bikes and just roam around all afternoon collecting insects and investigating and building forts and all of those things that we took for granted as we grew up. So that's the reason for the founding of this museum. Now, we called ourselves the Samuel J. Perry Natural History Museum at the beginning. And it was like building a baseball field, and we build it and they will come. We had no collection, nothing at all, except the idea of a museum for the benefit of this community. And traveling to Santa Barbara, their CEO of the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History became a mentor and started us out with a bird kit, a curriculum and a kit, which we assembled with 12 days worth of science experiment paraphernalia that sometimes elementary teachers are a little bit reluctant to do in the classroom. They're messy and require a lot of cleanup and a lot of preparation. So we provided that to the teachers. It was a third grade bird curriculum. And we provided a naturalist that also would go out to the classroom and assist the teacher and take along a rehabilitated live great horned owl. So kids were able to actually see a wild animal up close and learn in that way as well. So that was the beginning of this venture. By the time we learned about this building, we had a board of directors, and one of the board of directors was a man named Bill Orndorff. He was head of planning here at the city of Santa Maria. And he knew about this building. This is the oldest home. It's called the Hart Home. It was built in 1877, and it's one of the first historical landmarks in the city. It was established as a historical landmark in 1970. And it was vacant because the building had no insulation, no bathroom, and the Historical Society could not keep volunteers in the building because it was just too cold in the winter, too hot in the summer, and so it was rarely open, and it had been abandoned for a couple of years with police tape around it. So Bill Orndorff suggested, why don't you move your collection? And by then we had an insect kit and an insect collection that had been a partner with the LA County Museum of Natural History. And we had a rock and fossil kit for the junior high, and so we had accumulated some things by then and some connections. So we decided, okay, maybe it's time for us to have a place to start storing some of the collection we might accumulate. So in October of 1999, we opened the doors, and we didn't have anything, but we opened the doors and called ourselves a museum. What happened, we opened the doors, and of course the place was wallpapered and had lace curtains in the window, and it took a real leap of faith to imagine this building as a museum. But little by little, over the last 25 years now, we took the wallpaper off the walls and hired artists and wrote grants and decided to make each room into a separate habitat and display only regional collections. So we began accumulating collections, and the Oak Woodland was our very first room, and the Oak Woodlands is comprised of some murals of oak trees, and oak trees, I've learned, are a keystone species because they're host to many insects and many bird families, and they're a very critical element in our local landscape. Everyone gets along very harmoniously in our tiny oak woodland, and that is the quail can be right alongside the coyote without any trouble whatsoever. And we've got the little snake and the weasel, which are mortal enemies, and they're also living side by side harmoniously. So maybe we could learn a little bit of something by looking into that habitat. And so we've always had a sound element, a touch element involved, tried to have those involved. And those recordings were recorded by local Doug Tamuka, went out on a Quistapache ranch and put his sound equipment up, and he recorded the daytime sounds and the nighttime sounds out in the oak woodland. So that's what you hear in the oak woodland room. You'll hear the ocean sounds in the seaside sea life room, and you'll hear the actual whale songs. And that was inspired by the Long Beach Aquarium. They have a wonderful display on whale songs in Long Beach. We partner with many large museums, and I think that is so important when you're small like we are, is for the board and people that work on the museum to be exposed to all the great stuff that's out there with the really big museums. They're very willing to partner. We've got a partnership with the Monterey Bay Aquarium where we provide visitors with a fish card, which tells us the best kinds of fish to buy, fish that are not being overfished, fish that are not as likely to have mercury contamination. This big room is the Pacific Flyway room, and we live on the edge of the Pacific Plate, and that's a very large tectonic plate. But what is so unique about our area is that we have so many types of ecological habitats within a very small radius. We've got the ocean, we've got the oak woodlands, we've got beach areas, we've got grasslands and estuaries and mountains. And the Pacific Flyway is something else that's rather unique, and that is the reason we have all these geese and ducks. They're one of the most visible of the migratory birds, and they require vernal pools and pools of water, places to rest on their long flights up and down the coast. So we have those in flight, and most of our duck and geese species have been donated by the Romer family at Oscar Ferrari Collection and a local taxidermist, Stan Rosa. Well, we have a couple in here that are unique, and this beaver is the first beaver I'd actually seen as taxidermy, and he was actually roadkill on Nipomo, out in the Nipomo area, and that was provided by the Weinman family. Liz Weinman found that specimen and had him taxidermied. And the mountain lion up on this high wall looking down on us, which you really don't want this to happen in real life. But he's a handsome creature, and he was also roadkill on Highway 166. So these are the handicaps that wildlife has when it's interacting with vehicles on the roads. But we get to use these examples of wildlife to hopefully inspire people to be appreciative of wildlife and do our best to protect them as we can. This is our most exciting exhibit, and I really had not thought about our state flag. Our state flag has the California grizzly on it, and that is an extinct species. We have managed to kill every single one of those California grizzlies, so they are an extinct species. This particular grizzly is from the Napa Valley, a hunter, and there are actually two grizzlies in this display. One is a golden grizzly and one is dark, and they're from British Columbia. So they're nearly identical except for their DNA. They're a threatened species in Canada, but they aren't extinct. So we're very pleased to be able to display this bear and talk to the visitors about how our state flag is a warning to all of us that sometimes animals become extinct if we go too far. Well, the Tule elk is a happy story, because the Tule elk is an example of a species that was threatened down to 28 individuals, and yet hunters and conservationists work together to bring back herds of that Tule elk, and you can see those out on Highway 166 on the way to Bakersfield from time to time. That was one of our first displays, the Ocean and Sea Life exhibit. We had to expand it when we acquired a collection from 29 Palms. The Desert Museum decided they didn't want any more sea creatures. They wanted only desert or regional collections. So we bought their entire sea creature collection, and it contained 2 albatross. And albatross were the most unique and interesting of the collection we got from them, because albatross live on the surface of the ocean. They only fly to land to make their nest and have their young. Otherwise, they sleep on the surface of the ocean, they eat on the surface of the ocean 100 miles from land, and they drink the salt water, and it becomes fresh water in their bodies. So they're able to exist most of their lives out in the open ocean. So that's pretty unique. It's almost like the unique steelhead trout. It changes from a rainbow trout to a steelhead. The rainbow trout swims down the creek and down the river into the ocean, turns into another species, the steelhead, and lives in the open ocean for about 2 years, gains its size, changes the shape of its face, decides to then come back to its home creek or river and spawn for a next generation. And the steelhead trout doesn't live with just one adventure. If it can, if the way is clear for it to get back to the ocean, it can make 2 turns to the ocean and back for 2 generations. It's pretty amazing, an amazing story. The bird hall is it's kind of a humorous name for that little cubby hole, and if you have claustrophobia, you really probably don't want to go in there, but you can hear some of the bird sounds, and we have some birds on loan from Santa Barbara's museum, and some birds we've been able to collect from birds that fly into a window and end up in somebody's freezer, and we can find a good small bird taxidermist. But believe me, the small bird taxidermists are fewer than hen's teeth these days, so it's getting harder and harder to find a good one. Well, art, you mentioned art, and art is very much a part of this museum's offerings. So we have nature as well as history, as well as art. So we can appeal to a variety of interests when people walk through the front door. It isn't only just about looking at old things or only just about looking at animals. You're going to find some visual beauty. And one of our most proud possessions is the serpentine dolphin. That dolphin was created from our state rock, and that's the serpentine. It's kind of a grayish green rock, and it's done by a famous sculptor. That's John Cody from Solvang. And it was taking John quite a while to even start on the work that we had commissioned him for. So I asked him, why is it taking so long? And his remark was, I have to find the rock that has a dolphin in it. So it had to be a pretty big rock, and it had to be shaped in just such a way that he knew he could create a dolphin out of that rock. And it's just such a joy to get to know people that have a way of thinking like this that never occurred to me. And he made the most beautiful dolphin for right in the beginning, right in the front of our museum, and we can proudly offer that as part of our mission. Our mission was to provide everything we do free to all who wish to access it. So just walking down the sidewalk, we don't have to be open, and you can walk around the building. You can see art by several local artists all around the building in the windows, because we didn't want lace curtains in the windows. That was a little bit frightening, actually, for children who walked in expecting to see furniture, and they saw a grizzly bear. Some children would just start crying. And that's not the reaction we wanted. So we realized that we were sending a false signal by having those lace curtains. So we started putting art in the windows, and we've got mosaics out in front of the Steelhead and the Garibaldi, and those are by a famous Santa Barbara mosaic artist, Patty Jacquemin. We've got cement benches from an artist in Grover Beach with kelp embedded in it. Then we've got some raised images in another bench that was a glass artist from Los Osos, Ted Emmerich. So there is just so much to see, but you just have to be willing to pause for a moment and take a closer look to really appreciate everything we have within this small space that the city has granted us. All of the art is our wonderful local artist, Glenda Stevens. All of the mural art inside. There's one major piece in the ocean room, in the front room, where we commissioned a painting for the front room. And then Glenda matched the painting with her wall art. She's so good that she could match that so well. It looks like the same artist did the walls that did the painting. So we've just been so fortunate to meet wonderful artists along the way. Yes, we find that people find this an oasis within the urban environment. We have people coming and sitting in the backyard where we have multiple bird species and just eating their lunch, reading a book that they take out from the public library. In 2013, we had a garden committee headed up by Georgia Schrager, and they did a fantastic job. Isabel Green is a pretty famous landscape architect from Santa Barbara, and she designed the outline or framework of our native garden. So the fundraising took place under Georgia's direction, and then under Tahir Massoud, our president of the board at that time, the installation took place in 2013. So we have a fabulous native garden around the museum, and Nancy Heck is currently the garden chairperson, and she's been directing the team. They meet once a month and do some gardening. I think it's on the first or second Thursday of each month, and we welcome volunteers to either be docents inside or part of the garden committee. We do, and what kids have to learn to do is look really closely, because wildlife has a wonderful way of camouflage. So even though monarch butterflies are colorful, their caterpillars seem colorful when you look at them on a beige background, but if you look at them in a pile of milkweed, they're really hard to find. And we have some out there right now. So we're very pleased about it, but you have to look closely. And then when the monarchs are here, you have to look very closely to find their little eggs, and you have to look very closely to see aphids, because it's fierce out there. The aphids are trying to chew up the milkweed faster than the caterpillars, and then the ladybugs come and they try to eat up all the aphids. So we have war going out there very quietly. You have to have a magnifying glass to notice it, and it stops kids and it causes them to look closely at the aphids and count their legs, make sure it's really an aphid. It's pretty cute to see the discovery of something so small. It's just like the kids. I mean, I never would have thought that actually meeting all the variety of volunteers is one of the highlights. I would have never met all of these, the variety of people, the personalities, their backgrounds, just meeting the people that come through the door as well as the volunteers. That's part of it too. There are so many levels of satisfaction of working on a project like this. We always accept donations of any amount, and our hours are 11 to 4 Wednesday through Saturday and 12 to 2 on Sunday.